Hello, children. Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin today's story. It's called Twice Upon a Time. It's about a 32-year-old male who is standing in his bedroom, staring straight ahead and talking to himself, hoping that someone, somewhere, anywhere will listen. Oh, excuse me. Pardon my appearance. My evil stepmother banished me to live under the stairs because I said I didn't like Cocaine Bear. Anyway, today's movie from 1983 is Twice Upon a Time, an animated feature co-directed by John Cordy and Charles Swanson. Our story concerns an evil tyrant who orders his murder of crows to spread nightmares all over town and keep them in canisters. Sound familiar? But on the other side of town, there's a group of good people who want to spread pleasant dreams. And our two main characters are Ralph and Mumford. Ralph is this inexplicably shape-shifting animal creature, and Mumford is this silent, almost Jacques Tati type fellow who's kind of clumsy but also resourceful.
This is Mumford and I'm Ralph, the all-purpose animal.
So John Cordy, before this, among many other projects, he did the animations in the 70s and the 80s for Sesame Street, which were pretty iconic, and you can kind of see that style in this movie. And I first caught wind of Charles Swanson because he did a very funny and very striking animated sequence in the Frank Zappa movie 200 Motels. And so I was really excited to find out that he did a full-length feature movie with Flo and Eddie called Down and Dirty Duck, and that movie was a huge disappointment.
I got a duck.
That movie was very raw in mostly a bad way. It was just extremely juvenile and so half-baked and cheap. But what was interesting about it was the artwork style is occasionally pretty striking. I mean, it's mixing animation and drawings with still photographs. It's almost like this collage style, somewhat at times reminiscent of Yellow Submarine, which is also present in this movie. But the material in that movie, especially the gratuitous nudity and the prurient humor, it was just so unimaginative and with no direction. Twice Upon a Time is the exact opposite. The animation is imaginative, the characters are so colorful, and the voice acting is so inspired, and amazingly, apparently it was all improvised, but it's so seamless and natural and funny. This movie is so cute, it's perfect for kids, but it's also really freaking funny. And the melding of these two directors is so perfect. You can kind of tell that Cordy's got actual animation chops and he really brings these ideas to life, but at no point does it lose its sort of acerbic edge that Swanson brings. And I just love those weird backgrounds and that mixing between actual animation and real-life stock photos and drawings. The only thing that works against this movie is the very jarring profanity and graphic sexual imagery that kind of comes out of nowhere. It sort of pops up every few minutes to go, hey, you still paying attention to the movie? And it begs the question, who is this movie made for? There's a very confusing history to this movie's release, both in theaters and on home video. Apparently, for the first few screenings, well, teenagers and adults, they didn't like it. It was too boring, so they were walking out. So then the producers or whoever were like, how can we get the Meg in here? I know, we'll get the actors back and we'll ADR in a bunch of cursing. To those theater goers, I say, who needs ya? This movie was so much funnier than a whole bunch of movies I can think of that have mature and adult content, just as a kid's movie alone. And I'll admit, when I first turned it on, I was like, why am I watching this kid's movie? It's all cutesy and stuff, but you know what? I'm glad I stuck it out. This movie would have been so great and such a hit if they just kept it kid-friendly, honestly, and I think it's more interesting being subversive within that realm instead of just, yeah, we're just gonna throw curses in there, because that's what adults like and teenagers, right? And the other thing working against this movie is the very, very dated, awful, schmaltzy 80s music that pops in every now and then and kind of takes you out of the movie a bit and reminds you that it is a kid's movie. So that'll turn off the teenagers and adults. Meanwhile, kids won't be able to watch a movie with cursing in it. So again, who's this movie made for other than the weirdos like me or the people who watch my channel? There's so many great, hilarious moments in this movie, such as when Mumford destroys this computer after it tells him to stop pushing her buttons. There's a scene where he grabs on to this handle and it's going back and forth and it's speeding time up and slowing it down and destroying the space and time fabric of the universe. Among other things, I feel like there was maybe a bit of inspiration for Wallace and Gromit here, because it's the flip side of that. You have the animal doing all the talking and then another character who never speaks. And actually the voice of Ralph was done by Lorenzo Music, who is most familiar to me for doing the voice of Garfield on the Saturday morning TV show version of Garfield. There's just a certain nostalgia factor to it and a real warmness to his voice, and it's just so unassuming and charming. It gives me a similar feeling of wholesomeness that I get from the voice of Joel Hodgson from Mystery Science Theater 3000. And there's all sorts of interesting facts connected to this movie. George Lucas is a producer on it, and it doesn't seem like he had much to do with the actual production, but it sure doesn't hurt to have his name attached to it, especially because there's a character that's like a robot that has a TV in its chest, and occasionally it'll comment on something that's happening in the movie with a clip from another movie, so Star Wars is in there, so I'm sure that's the only reason they got the permission to get that in there. And as the very long opening title suggests, with its multiple characters, there's all sorts of characters and subplots and things in this movie that I haven't and don't even have the time to mention. So in closing, I really recommend this movie. I thought it was so funny. Despite its somewhat hard to find nature, as of this video, it's available in good quality, apparently a DVD rip on Internet Archive. So I highly suggest you check it out. Or, maybe you should just watch something else instead, something that's more format focused and carefully crafted for the algorithm for your cynical consumption. I know how to have fun. I have fun all the time. I can have fun down here underneath my dwelling in someone else's house. Stay sexy.